and let you get us started. Okay. You're muted. I can't hear you.
Can everybody else hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Okay. I didn't do anything different, so I'm not sure. Anyway, thanks for letting me know. We're going to start, or I'm going to start with our PCCEP group values. Hopefully most of you guys have heard these, but if not, we want to be consistent and let folks know that we use these through our meetings. The first one is listen actively and respectfully, share airtime, be present and open to new information and perspectives, assume positive intent, respect each other, respect the group, speak your own truth, communicate directly, honestly, and respectfully, ask questions to clarify, call out bias, and be okay with ambiguity. All right. The next part of our agenda, we try to do a check-in question. We want folks to feel like this is the community and to be involved, and for everyone to share a few words, because we don't want to be a subcommittee where we just do all the talking and folks just, you know, are there listening. So the check-in question that we have for tonight, and I'll put it in the chat. It's, what is the best piece of advice you have ever been given? And while you're thinking about that, what we want to do is combine the check-in question with introduction. So as you share your answer, if you could also introduce yourself with name, if you want to do pronouns, it's up to you. And then, you know, organization that you're with. And so the check-in question again is, what is the best piece of advice you have ever been given? If there's anybody that wants to start us off, let me know.
I'll start it off.
All right.
Unless you all think I'm brave, this is a cowardly move, okay? Let me just qualify it right now. I'm too old to remember the best piece of advice I was given. And that's why I decided to just go ahead. Oh my, okay. Is that something on my end? Okay, so I'll give some recent advice that I was given by a former colleague who passed away last month. And that was, the person that is everywhere is nowhere. And that was with regard to focusing in on what your strengths are and how you want to serve, and narrow it down to where you can actually be effective, and that you can see that you're effective, and that your team members see that you're effective. And although my friend Shahid gave me this advice years ago, because I spoke at his service, I mentioned that because it was fresh in my mind and it was valuable advice. So let's see, and then you asked us to say something else, Amy. What was it?
Just your name and your pronouns if you want to share, and then if you're with an organization or if
okay. Yes, Celeste Carey, pronouns she, her. I am a programmer and I am the interim co-manager at KBOO Radio, and I also do volunteer work with Self Enhancement Inc. and a couple other organizations here and there. But I have decided my grown-up grown-up volunteer gig is the PCCEP. So right about now, that's becoming my number one volunteer focus.
Thank you, Celeste, for sharing. That is good advice. I think what makes this a little bit smoother is when we each pick someone next. So Celeste, if you want to pick someone to go next, and then we'll continue in that fashion.
Okay, Emily is right below me on my square. So Emily, I'm going to pick you. And thank you for being gracious.
Thank you. I'm Emily Roshan. I'm the Service Coordination Team Program Manager, which is within the Police Bureau under the umbrella of Behavioral Health Unit. Actually, just today, one of the clinicians in our office, we were joking around that our mothers would always tell us that you kind of have to suck it up and do things that you just don't want to do sometimes, and it's okay. I'm gonna pick Theo.
Hello, my name is Theo Lada. I use he, him pronouns. Thanks for being here. I'm a PCCEP staff member, and the best piece of advice I ever got was from my mom, and she said, let your kids be the love of your life. So that guides my actions. And I will pick Tia. We can't hear you, Tia.
Sorry about that. My name is Tia and my pronouns are she, her. I'm a PCCEP alternate, and I volunteer at Rahab Sisters, a program for unhoused women or people who identify as female. I stay quite busy volunteering with a few other agencies, but Rahab Sisters is where I volunteer most of my work time. I'm still trying to think of the best advice, and I'm just going back to my school counselor, my high school counselor, because it was such a hard time for me in high school, and she just really taught me to be my own person and to really use my voice. And I just have so many difficulties in high school. It helped me become more independent and go to college and branch out of the situation I was in with my family. So that's why I became a school counselor. That's it. I can't, I'm looking through the names. Okay, Claudia.
Hi, welcome everyone. I am Claudia. I'm the project assistant for PCCEP. Thank you guys for being here this afternoon. And I would say the best advice that I was given was from my grandfather. He's an immigrant from Mexico, and he just would always tell me to just keep working hard, to always be a hard worker. And I really take that advice and roll with it, because he's actually today's his 85th birthday, and so he's worked hard all his life, and so I see what he's accomplished, and it just encourages me to keep going and work harder. So thank you. And I will pass it to Jared, if you haven't gone, Jared.
I haven't gone. Thank you. Hi, I'm Jared Hager. He, him pronouns. I'm here with the Department of Justice, and my role is the monitor of a settlement agreement between the United States and the city of Portland. I think the best advice that I've received a lot of good advice, but an easy one and a good one is to always make the next right choice, so that you don't get hung up too much on past mistakes or regrets. And that's served me well in my recovery from alcoholism and other things. And with that, I will pass it to Barb. Did Barb go? I don't think so.
Hey, you get to hear the voice, and you're not gonna, oh, maybe you will see a picture. Let's see. Hi, my name is Barb Rainish, and I am a peer support specialist and a member of this committee. I use she, her pronouns usually, and I've been given a lot of advice over the years. But I think that when my dad dropped me off at college and told me I was welcome to change my major, but he said not to philosophy or political science. No offense to anybody else, but that is the best advice I got. And I am going to pick, Amy, have you gone? Let's have Amy go.
Okay, everyone. Amy Anderson here. The best advice I was ever given was a long time ago when someone told me, of all the things, I get going at one time, they would tell me, pick one thing and do it with excellence rather than focusing on a million things that don't ever really get to that point. So that for me was the best advice because, I like to go on and do a lot of different projects, but I'm learning that one or two completed well is better than, 20 not completed at all. So that was my best piece of advice. Do one thing and do it exceptional, So let me see. I'm going to pass it to Jan Friedman, who just arrived, I think.
All right, I apologize. I just stepped away, so we're doing introductions. Is that right? Or I'm sorry.
Yes, and the question was, what was the greatest piece of advice you've ever been given?
Wow. I guess I'm gonna be short, probably be yourself.
Be yourself. Oh, and pick somebody. She doesn't.
Is there anybody else who hasn't gone? Stephen, have you gone?
Hasn't gone. Leah.
No, I have not. There we are. I'm Steve Myro. I'm one of the sergeants in the behavioral health unit. And one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever gotten was from my grandfather. He was a carpenter, and I would work in the garage with him all the time and make little things. But he always said, the right tool for every job makes it easier. Something along those lines. But I always get the gist of it. Whenever you're working on a project or something like that, if you have the right tool, it's going to make it a lot easier. If you don't, you're going to spend a lot of time trying to get things right. And I think Captain Bates.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm Jay Bates. I am with the Portland Police Bureau, and I work in the Professional Standards Division. I use he, him pronouns. And for me, first of all, you guys are all coming up with great stuff. Tia, I love your story because it makes me feel like you bring compassion to that position. And as a father, I feel good that you're in schools and helping kids. But along those lines, when I was a young cop, I was working way too much. And I had a sergeant bring me in, and it's kind of an old saying, but it stuck with me. And maybe neglecting my family a little too much, working too much. And he told me the most important thing is to keep the most important thing, the most important thing. And that's just stuck with me. So that's my best piece of advice. And I think only Chase is left. So I'll pass it to Chase.
All right. Hey, I'm Chase Bryson. I'm a police officer at the Portland Police Bureau, and I'm the Crisis Intervention Team Coordinator. It's a piece of advice, but I got it from a book, but I like it a lot because that's a big question, the best piece of advice. So, and that's, it's in a little anecdote, but it's stay in your 3-foot world. And in the story that it's in, it essentially means like, you can only control only worry about the things that you can control and that are within like your grasp at that moment. And worrying about all the other stuff isn't helpful. So I like that. And it's a good thing to kind of live by.
Judith, do you want to say yours?
Thank you. Sorry, I thought we were doing them in the box. And in the meantime, I thought of different great advice. I'm Judith Mowry. I support the staffing of the PCCEP. And I guess it just came to my mind that maybe my most recent greatest advice was drink water and stay hydrated.
And then Leah.
Our new hard climate.
Yeah, Leah.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Leah Drebin, she, her. I'm here as a community member, but I have experience in policing within the criminal justice system. And I don't know about the best piece of advice. That's kind of hard, but one piece of advice is certainly that actions speak louder than words. And that has helped me tremendously with relationships, recognizing a relationship wasn't good for me, but also in just personal convictions, just following that advice, and don't just speak about it, be about it, and take action in what you believe in. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Leah. It looks like there's a DC on the call. Would you like to share? Well, maybe I scared them away. I don't see them anymore. I already introduced myself, but I didn't share my piece of advice. So I'll just share my piece of advice. I'm going to say it in a nicer way than it was given to me, because it was given to me very straightforward and very plain talk. And I can't remember exactly how it went. So this is what I remember. And it's from a supervisor at the Portland Police Bureau. He was my supervisor, Derek Rodriguez. It said something like, he said that I would have some leaders and mentors that would likely disappoint me, but overall see their great traits and pick the ones that resonate with me and let the other ones go. So basically emulate the ones that I value and don't copy the ones that I don't. So looks like Rochelle Silver is on the call. I don't think you went yet. Do you want to share?
I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. I just came on the meeting.
Sure. We're just doing introductions and answering a check-in question. The check-in question is, what is the best piece of advice you have ever been given?
The best piece of advice that I've ever been given is to finish my education.
Thank you, Rochelle. I think that's everyone. So I will pass it on over to Amy.
All righty, ladies and gentlemen, everything was so wonderful. I appreciate everybody sharing. I definitely have heard some of those, and I will keep some of them to heart because, yeah, they sound really good. Well, this portion of our meeting was going to be designed around getting input on something happening for discussion now called Core Patrol Services. It covers a multi-dimensional list of topics and subject matter. Some of the information has already been discussed in other meetings and kind of voted on, but I and the other members here wanted to get everybody's input from the community and the police on what parts of the Core Patrol Services they felt might need some work or future recommendations. But given the scope of how large that document is, I think tonight I really would like to focus it on the officer wellness section, because health and wellness is something I'm really into. And I believe we're all looking forward to how to better take care of ourselves in all environments, work, home, play. And I think this section of Core Patrol Services for me is a good place to start. So Theo, did you want to give a little history around the Core Patrol Services and how we, and what the process is?
Of course. Thank you, Amy, and thank you all for being here. Again, my name is Theo Lada. So the PCCEP in 2020 was charged by Mayor Wheeler with reviewing core patrol services in PPB as part of his 19-point plan. The PCCEP is made up of volunteers, so it's really strangely equipped. I'm sorry, Barb, I can't be that much louder. I'm super close to my computer. My voice is just the way it is, but I'll get really close to the computer. How's that? Is that
No,
better?
I got it. I just upped my volume. We're good.
So the PCCEP is made up entirely of volunteers. So the PCCEP hired 2 data analysts to help with the analyzing part of the Core Patrol Service data. So these recommendations were disseminated throughout Portland on the MAP app. So there was hundreds of responses from Portland residents across a variety of different demographics. And police officers were sent out a unique one for police officers, but we didn't get very many responses back on that one. In fact, I didn't see any responses back for that one specifically. So there were opportunities for police officers to engage in this information, but for whatever reason, rank and file police officers we haven't heard from rank and file police officers. PCCEP hasn't heard from rank and file police officers. So the point of this is to really get input and increase the collaboration on these recommendations and to really identify how police can be integrated into PCCEP recommendations within this subcommittee at every stage. So a while ago, I believe it was 2018, the PCCEP made recommendations on the initial officer wellness plan. And every recommendation that the PCCEP made was adopted. So in the most recent Core Patrol Service data, 5 recommendations within the officer wellness recommendation were disseminated, and I've pasted them here. But if anybody's on the phone or for whatever reason can't read the chat, I'm going to read them aloud as well. The recommendations were to 1, fully fund and support programs meant to improve the wellness of police officers and all other city employees tasked with maintaining public safety. 2, create a public list of available EAP mental health providers and allow police officers, firefighters, and 911 operators to anonymously rate and comment concerning their ability to help with specific issues. 3, to more effectively provide wellness services. Look for ways to share such services across the PPB, Portland Fire and Rescue, and BOIC. 4, to alleviate officer concerns seeking mental health services may have a negative impact on their career. Move resources meant to connect officers to mental health services out of the traditional chain of command within the PPB. And 5, to examine the possibility of creating rotations for officers so that all officers spend a certain amount of time working in different roles and low impact roles. Requiring all officers to participate in such rotations would counter the stigma regarding request transfers to lower impact roles. So those are the 5 and they're pasted in the chat. So really, we just wanted to create a space where officers could share their perceptions of those, could comment on those, could critique those, could try to give advice on what an implementation phase would look like for those recommendations. If you like them or if you hate them, that's useful information as well. So really, we just want to give a chance for Amy and Yolanda and Barb and the rest of the Behavioral Health Subcommittee wants to give a chance for police officers to really collaborate on this, because we just didn't hear from police officers at the initial stage of the solicitation phase. Does anybody have any questions? I also pasted the full recommendation in the chat. The part for officer wellness starts on page 13.
Theo, real quick, sorry, can you place the link in for the full Core Patrol Services document in case folks want to look at other subjects? You know, I just wanted to focus on the wellness because of time, but there's a lot of information in that material. So thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Does anybody have any questions? I realize I ran through that quickly just because I want to get to you all as police officers and hear from you.
This is Emily. Again, I'm non-sworn, so I'm not a police officer, but I work with PPB. The solicitation process for the survey, so I only saw one survey that did come out, and it was right before the committee met to make the recommendations. Is that the one that you're referring to?
I think that was the police specific one. So we all had, so the PCCEP itself had, I think, 4 or 5 work sessions around these, and all the community was invited. The map app survey went out to all the listservs. So we sent it through our channels at PPB. We sent it through Marlon, who does the equity stuff there. So we tried to get as many eyes on it. I'm saying we as PCCEP. I'm not a PCCEP member. I'm just the staff, but it's easier to say we. So we sent it as far and as wide as we could. Sam Diaz sent it out where he could. I believe a few of the commissioners, including Commissioner Rubio and Hardesty, sent out the map app survey. And there were hundreds of responses in the second iteration, and the first one was just an open-ended question about Core Patrol services. So there were 2 iterations, and then a third one that was police officer specific that the PCCEP sent over to your ACs in DC.
Okay, so just that final survey, the one that was out in the community since January, I think the first time, and it was the identification of these recommendations came out that the night of when the formal recommendations were gonna be made public. And I know that just for me, as you know, as a non-sworn, as a resident of the city as well, like I didn't have time to reflect and to really kind of dive in, because and there was folks that were going to be completely missed with that survey, with the timing of that survey that came out. So I'm just wondering if that is why you had lack of response. And I don't want to distract from what the agenda is today, because this, the wellness portion of it is extremely important. But I just, I don't know if we've talked about that, about making sure that surveys and things like that are solicited like with, kind of months in advance, and instead of, even a couple weeks before is not really enough time to kind of generate that, in a response that, you would want from folks that obviously this does impact, and they do have, the experience and, the knowledge to give their feedback.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, I was wondering if anyone might have an answer to Jared's question.
He did.
Oh, I missed
Sorry,
it.
it's in the chat. Sorry. Thank you, Jay.
Okay, so now I have another question to ask.
Yep, you bet. I'll get
those who might know.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
About the Wellness Directive that just is coming up for review. Are any of you in the room familiar with that directive in relationship to this document?
as far as what, I'm sorry. I'm familiar with the Wellness Directive.
Okay, we're talking about the recommendations in the Core Patrol Services document that we're working with. And since I wasn't around when a lot of this stuff was created, I don't know how far back it goes, you know, in its origination. So I guess the Wellness Directive is due for review, but I don't know if it's the same information or thought process as the recommendations.
Nope, they're separate. Core patrol services. And it's active safety.
So does anybody know the difference in the two or the reasoning for having two separate things to focus on?
And I think part of the difference, and I could be wrong, but I think this is right. The directives come up on a schedule for review, and every time new directives come up, we get a list of we get a notice of that. And so they just keep going through. I haven't read the directive, so I'm sorry. I don't know how it's different from the recommendation. I'm assuming the directive is about what has already exists, because I don't think, because policy reviews, I think, come out in a somewhat different way.
Okay, is it the same title category like officer wellness?
So, yeah, I guess I'm not really quite understanding your questions. So directives are, she's correct. They come up for review. If it's up for review, we'll take public recommendations for that, which, you know, will go into consideration for the rewrite of that directive.
Okay,
I guess
let me see if I can re-explain this. In my mind, when I'm looking at recommendations, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're talking about officer wellness. That's in my mind. That's what I'm reading. When I see a directive, I think of it as policy around the same information, officer wellness, but sometimes it's not the same and the topics are different.
Okay, so this is actually talking about wellness times, now that I'm looking at it.
So that's what I was trying to figure out. The correlation between the work that PCCEP's going to do, number one, about the directives, and number two, about Core Patrol Service recommendations, because we're charged to review both. But I need to get in my head if the two are relatable or if they're separate topics of conversation. That's what I'm trying to figure out ahead of time.
Amy, do you know that if the directives were reviewed by PCCEP before making the recommendations, or if that was part of it? Because you're right, like the directives are like kind of the internal like policies, procedures around, you know, specifically this topic of wellness. Do you think that was reviewed and then they're making recommendations to kind of expand on the already existing policy?
No, what I'm trying to say is I'm looking at the directives, right? For it says the Portland Police Bureau Wellness Program. Okay, this is what it says. Barb is really good about bringing me the writing. And it talks about the definition, and then it talks about what the policies are. And then I'm trying to figure out if this wellness program is the same program we're talking about on the Core Patrol Services document. Is it referencing the same program, or do we have two different programs?
So the Core Patrol Services, that, as you know, and just as background for everybody, was Mayor Wheeler, as part of his 19-point plan, tasked the PCCEP with looking at the Core Patrol Services. So PCCEP did the survey and then heard back from community. One of the buckets that the data analysts put things in was officer wellness, right? So mental health, access to mental health, folks experiencing houselessness, these are all different buckets where community where it was based on community feedback, right? So whether it's part of the same program or not, I don't know if it really matters. There's clearly some intersection on the officer wellness, but this is just what Portland residents said was important to them in terms of feedback from the community for the police officers. Does that make sense?
It's okay, Theo. I'm just trying to help. I just want folks, like I know when I read something, I want to have a clear understanding if they're different, if they're similar, so I can evaluate them a little more thoroughly, separately, if they're separate. But if I'm making a recommendation on what I perceive would be a good officer wellness piece, I'm trying to figure out if I'm referencing two different applications of it or the same application. Does that make sense? Like, is there more than one Portland Police Wellness Program? Or is there only one?
Well, there's just the one, and it's just the wellness program. And I've just pasted the link to the original. It's not the full wellness program, but it was the original PCCEP recommendations to PPP that Jared provided background information that they were accepted, but PCCEP hasn't heard about implementation.
And this won't.
Leave
this
that. Go ahead.
Sorry, this will help you tonight, but we have a wellness, like an officer in charge of that program, Leo Harris, who at some point, if you want to know more about that, I'm sure he'd be more than happy to come and talk about exactly what he's doing and what his mission is and all that. But yes, it's just his, yeah. And for Barb, yeah, I can totally set that up when you guys want.
That would be wonderful. Yes. So for tonight's discussion, then I'm just going to focus on what folks think about. What would they like to see? You know, what would officers like to see in their wellness program? You know, what does the community think should be included in a good, solid wellness program? That's what our meeting is about tonight. So I'm going to stop. I just wanted clarity because we are going to discuss the directives as part of our charge. And I just don't want any confusion coming up in the future about these subjects. That's all, because we're doing them separately. That's why I wanted to bring them together tonight, because we're going to be tasked to review both of them. So who would like to go first in giving us some ideas of what you think a good wellness program should look like or should include, if it doesn't already?
Hi, Amy. Dan Casper. Can I speak?
Hey, welcome, man. Yes, please.
Hey, thanks. Okay, so what I want to bring up, and I don't know if Portland Public Police do this, but in Hillsborough Police, they actually have an award-winning program for meditation. I know it sounds crazy, but they actually have this program, and it's been on the news, local news, and I know people actually at immigration in Washington, D.C. are following that program as well because they're so impressed by it. And they've done studies, and actually, because of that meditation program, it's taught by somebody who really gets police, who really know police and how they think. And I think he's a former policeman himself. But actually for shooting and stuff like that, it's gone down because of it. Their reaction goes slower, and it's also just healthy for them. They kind of like it. So I think Channel 8 had a section on it a couple of years ago. I'm sorry, maybe other people from Portland Public Police know what that is, but it's out in Hillsborough. You just have to call Hillsborough Police. And I've talked to them out here because of COVID, they stopped doing the program, but they found it to be a really good one.
Thank you, Anne. I'm all with you. I'm going to learn a new one called Qigong. That one is supposed to be another mind-body meditation exercising program. So Qigong, yeah. I'm learning about that. So
Yeah, so but this is meditation for police people themselves. So it's kind of different. You know, you got to know your crowd, know your people, and work with them on where they're at.
thank you. Special
Amy,
program. Got it.
I guess maybe it'd be helpful, and I'm certainly not the expert on what the police bureau is doing at wellness, but since that's what we're talking about, and I'm here, I'll give you my best like summary of what I'm aware that's going on as far as officer wellness, if you want, and then maybe that's a good place to start. That way people know what we are doing. So we have a lot of classes that focus on wellness. So we've gotten classes from mindfulness meditation instructors who are culturally competent, like former police officers and stuff like that. A lot of some presentations on like trauma-informed care and some talk of vicarious trauma and you know, stress management and kind of managing your job outside of your life from licensed clinical social workers and people like that. And I forget who they work for, but like essentially presentation from like physical therapist type people about, you know, taking care of your body and health and nutrition and things like that. And then if there's time, officers can take time for wellness and to take care of themselves, whether that's meditation or working out, if available. And then and I know this was also mentioned in the recommendations, but we have an Eap program, and that's run by Officer Amy Bruner-Denner. But through that program, we have lists of, again, culturally competent clinicians and mental health providers that we can go to that are vetted. Really, I'm a member of the EAP, so I'm a peer support person for the Bureau. And I feel like if there, was or is a stigma, I feel like that's certainly something that's lessening. I don't feel like there's a huge stigma for like going to a counselor. I hear sometimes people openly talk about it, like going to see somebody to talk stuff out, things like that. So I think, although certainly I'm sure there's room for improvement there as far as a little bit of stigma. That's definitely something it's not like a brick wall, like no one can talk about getting help for stuff that's going on at work. And if I missed anything, Sarge or Captain, feel free to jump in, or Emily.
I wonder, just for the sake of the conversation, because we're really trying to get it around the Corps Patrol service recommendations. I wonder if folks are willing to go through each one and just to see if those are generally supportable or not supportable. Just in the eyes of police officers, I can assure you that nobody, like it doesn't need to be a whole conversation, but it's a good opportunity, I think, to get like a temperature check from police officers on if these are recommendations that you would support as police officers. The first one, and if you don't want to, then you don't have to answer, of course. But the first one is just fully fund and support programs meant to improve the wellness of police officers and all other city employees tasked with maintaining public safety. And I can do that with the second and third and fourth and fifth, if this is an amenable process.
Yeah, Theo, I think we've done like 1 through 4. It's 5 that isn't really implemented. But 1 through 4 look like things that we kind of do already, and I'll kind of defer to Chase and Myro, but it does look like those are things we already do.
Yeah, I think you're right, Captain. I think the last one's a little confusing to me. Number 5, is the intent of that to move people from patrol into off-street units over certain time periods, or how does, I guess I just don't quite understand how that one would work.
Aren't
Number
you guys
5.
already doing it? You're rolling people into new positions. You've switched folks around from different departments. You've shortened the caseload on one side of the functionality of police work and made officers learn other things. I think you're actually doing it without even realizing it. You're cross-training other officers for different job duties. And I think that's what the number 5 was really all about, so that number 1, folks don't get burned out. Number 2, maybe you can find people who are excellent in other areas that never get, investigated. So as a community member, I'm just seeing number 5 already taking place just based upon your budget constraints. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, typically when if somebody takes like a job, if they're in patrol and they interview for an off-street position, such as being in like our special victims unit or even in the behavioral health unit, it's not a rotation. The officer will go there and work there. And as long as that individual
I see where you're going. The word is really confusing. I would probably use the word mentor, mentoring others, in different roles to see if they were interested in, maybe they applied for something, but down the road, they may want to try something else. I don't know how it works. So yeah, we could pick a different word. I'm surprised nobody caught that before.
Well, then it sounds like, Captain Bates, that you've read through the document pretty extensively. Are there any things that, in particular, throughout the rest of the document, I know this is going to stay on officer wellness specifically, but just upon your readings of it, is there anything that sticks out positively or negatively, or just is striking to you in the recommendations?
I'm not going to pretend that I've read the entire document. I just read the 5 things you posted.
Okay.
So that's it. And really, to be honest with you guys, I read number 5 as something completely different. So I read 5 as the street officer that is burned out, where we really, that happens. Somebody that has to go take street calls night after night after night. Is there a way to get them off the street? Is there a way to rotate them? And we don't really have that in place. And I think that's what Sergeant Myro was trying to say is we have assignments that you could apply for, but those are very competitive. And so unfortunately, not everybody's going to get that opportunity to rotate out of those street assignments. I understand what you guys are saying, if that was what your intention is, but unfortunately, there's only so many of those off-street assignments that exist.
Go ahead, Ann.
I just had a question because when I was helping more closely with the Portland Public Police, I heard talking that the officers who've been there for a long time, many years, just are a little bit different than the, let's say, younger or newer officers. And do any of these address that? Just a different way of looking at work, how much to sacrifice, things like that. I'm sorry, I can't see them because I'm on a phone, but it's just a question because I heard that there's different kinds of attitudes and the police can speak to that, please. But it's different. But I heard from internally that younger generational police see things different than the older ones. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll jump in, I guess. So I don't think it's fair to categorize older or younger, or, I mean, there's super motivated older police officers and there are less motivated older police officers. There are super motivated younger police officers and less motivated police officers. I don't think that that's probably any different in any profession, to be honest with you. I think that, regardless of what your profession is, I think that we see that. I think that maturity happens the longer you're in the job. And the more experience you have, the better you're able to adapt to certain situations that are presented to you. So I would say that happens. And at the same token, maybe a younger police officer that doesn't have that experience, they may be a little more gung-ho to certain things that an older police officer's like, slow down, rookie. That would be kind of what I would say. And that's my perspective, but I think it's important to get Officer Bryson's perspective and Sergeant Myro's perspective, because all three of us kind of have different time on the Bureau. So it's a good range to get. So I am the old guy. I can say that about myself.
Thank you.
I guess, yeah. So I guess for me, I guess what I would maybe see, and again, I can only speak from my perspective, which I've been here, 10 years. Policing, as almost every profession, has been evolving, since its inception, and continues to evolve and change and grow. And the mission that we're given and the types of things we're expected to do or not do is changing constantly. And so I guess to speak to the difference of newer officers to more senior officers, I guess you may get, the officers that are coming in now are coming in with the idea of what policing is now, right? Like they're used to that world and what's expected and from police officers and the type of job we do. Whereas, when I came in, that was like it was slightly different than what officers coming in today are. And I'm sure when the captain came in, it was different than what I came in as. And so I think in that sense, like maybe you get a slightly different mentality coming into the job with
Nice to see your wife here.
What's expected. And so, but we get all types of people with all different reasons for coming here, which is, I think, what makes us great. Is it's not like we have people with just the same interests that have the same background. We have a pretty impressive array of people with different backgrounds that are here for different reasons. And I think that, only can make us better.
I think that's a really important point and an interesting segue to a follow-up question I have for you, Captain Jay and Chase and anybody else on the call. What did the PCCEP or the community miss in their recommendation about officer wellness and officer health and wellness? What would you have liked to see included in this recommendation in this section around officer wellness? So what did you miss, since we have you as a captive audience right now?
Theo, I really actually like your list. I think it's a really good little summary. The 5 recommendations, you shrunk them down to really meaningful things. I actually even like number 5. I just don't know how practical it is. That's the only problem. I do think that there is a need to try to get people, out of a rut if they're in one. That's just something we're going to have to figure out a way to work on. At the same token, you don't want to punish officers who are doing really good work in off-street assignments. So if they're in an off-street assignment, it's tough to say, hey, you have to go now. It's time to let somebody else here. And I know the argument will be, well, maybe the other person would even do better. That's true. That's absolutely true. So there's some kind of balance in there that we're going to have to dig deeper into.
A quick question. Could you do a survey of police and ask them from 1 to 5 what they think? I'm just an idea, so we get more input than just a few people here. Just an idea, Theo. I don't know if you guys can do that.
I would love to do that. I think in the police bureau, as is in any place in government, whether it's local or state, you get input from like the higher level of folks, and they kind of speak for the rest of everybody. So, and I don't think that's a bad thing or a good thing. I just think it's just a thing. And that's true of PPB. Oftentimes you get folks speaking on behalf of the Bureau who are allowed to speak on behalf of the Bureau, and rank and file police officers typically aren't allowed to speak. I won't speak for police officers, obviously, but it's my interpretation that oftentimes there's not that feeling of comfort to speak your mind. So I, like, as part of not just this recommendation, but as other recommendations, it would be really helpful to hear from police officers about what PCCEP missed on a recommendation, whether it's this recommendation, this set of recommendations in corporate patrol services, or any recommendation that has to do directly with police officers. It would be helpful to hear from police officers who are rank and file police officers about what was missed, not just the super upper echelon. And I love working with those folks. I don't want that to be misconstrued. I love working with those folks. They're awesome. But it's helpful to hear from rank and file police officers about that.
Theo, I guess on that note, do you know, I'm unaware, in drafting the recommendations, I know the survey was sent out and I'm not sure exactly what happened. I know I didn't get it in time to have any input. Like during the meetings or discussions, I understand they're public meetings, I think the regular PCCEP, just like this one, was there any like invitation or like ask towards the like rank and file police officers, or like, you know, like with the wellness one, you know, invite to Officer Harris, who's in charge of the wellness program. You know, I'm in charge of or the coordinator, at least on the officer level, of our ECIT program. Was there any like invitation or discussion with people like that while drafting these?
So not directly. The drafts were sent over to AC Frum and DC Davis, and they gave their input, and every piece of input was adopted by those who were writing the corporate patrol service recommendations directly. So every piece of feedback was integrated into the recommendations from PPB. With that said, it would be great if police officers, go ahead, Jared.
Oh, thanks, Theo. I could have waited. I just wanted to add some history on the 2018 recommendation that PCCEP made, because that might have been, you know, before your time, Theo. I think it was right around when you got hired. But that was a recommendation that built off of a training advisory council recommendation. So I believe, you know, Greg Stewart had some input on that. And I want to say Todd Tackett was the person at training division who was leading it at that time. And I know the settlement and policy committee, and it was Andrew Calick at the time, had gotten some input from training division, and it might even be Chief Lavelle was the head of community services at that time, and he had some input. So there was some input on the original recommendation on this core patrol thing. I don't think the rank and file really turned out to the workshops that, you know, whether they were invited or not. At least that's my understanding or experience. I sat in on those and I would have only known by their names, but there weren't people I recognized.
Thanks, Jared.
I don't know if this was already mentioned, that there was feedback from at least one officer about the frustration of not having been included. And I think my understanding is the intent was to include them. Theo's worked much more closely with that project than I have. And I think there was some frustration that didn't end up going out to y'all in enough time to get good feedback.
This is Amy here. I also want to echo what Theo was saying about how things go from the top down. And I understand that working in certain industries, you have to do that. So how about this? How about we just take the 5 recommendations to start with, and maybe Chase and what is it, Lieutenant Bates, Captain? I don't know. Sorry, I don't.
Captain, and then he'll be commander.
Okay.
soon.
Anyways, what if you guys were to like create an email loop to all the officers possible and just kind of try to get their thoughts on those 5? And then maybe we can revisit this, because I know that distribution of information is really based on who people have in their networks. I've worked on major projects and I know returning surveys or information, you have to go through certain means to get that information disseminated. So what does leadership think about maybe you guys doing an internal ask? And then the information goes back to you and then you can bring it to us so that we have the information like without people's names or emails or whatever might make them feel comfortable about sharing. Because sometimes people don't like sharing because it reveals their email address or their information. I want to make it as, shall I say, I use the word quiet, but loud, but not bringing attention to everyone.
Yeah, so Amy, I think that, Chase kind of hit this earlier, Officer Bryson hit this earlier. We have a wellness coordinator position. And I think that it would be most appropriate that I get him those recommendations, and then he distributes those recommendations as PCCEP recommendations and then gets feedback. I want his position to kind of take the lead on this is the way I would look at it, since he would be the one that would be implementing, trying to actually have those types of recommendations and trainings and information that he shares with membership.
I find that totally exciting. I love the idea. I forgot you guys said that earlier. Yes, I would love to work with the coordinator of this program because I think we'll get really rich feedback.
Amy, we have some questions in the chat box as well. Celeste had said she was interested in knowing about the structure of the EAP options for members of the Police Bureau, and Jan has asked she would like to know about the PPB culture allowing or even encouraging officers to get treatment for their own mental health concerns.
I can, I guess, speak to that. Again, not an expert in EAP. We do have an officer that's her job, but I'm a peer support member. The structure, I guess, is we have, the city EAP. So we can reach out to that, which is completely separate. And, like no one at work needs to find out. There's a separate number and they can set you up and you get a certain amount of visits for free, paid for by the city, I guess, through AP. And then there are, if you tell them, they, like I said, they vetted and have like culturally competent counselors, which for a lot of people ends up being important that understand law enforcement and first responders specifically. And then we have an officer that's in charge of the EAP program who also can help people coordinate or, whatever they need in the Bureau. Like it's her job to just try to advocate for officers and what they need, whatever that might look like. We have officers trained and certified. We have officers that have been involved in deadly force encounters that have taken extra training as well. And whenever something like that happens, obviously the impact on an officer is and their family is significant. And so they go and, help that officer navigate that, not from purely the like emotional and whatever that looks like, family, like just make sure there's working through that process in a healthy way. And then we have peer support members who really can be there for any officer and have a little bit more training and knowledge of just kind of the systems in the Bureau. And if people need support or just like checking in with people, or like say there's like just like a really nasty call they went to, or like a death and it seems like they're not doing well, we can reach out to them, make sure they're doing all right, check in. If they need support, like getting to a counselor or getting to whatever, if they need, like they're really struggling on their shift that day, we can work to like, hey, let's see if you can take the rest of the day off and just like have kind of get your mental health in the right place. So that's the structure to the best of that I can give it. There's a lot more to it. There's some alcohol and recovery portions of it. There's a lot of things that we do. There's a chaplain program as well. And as far as, I think there's another question about stigma. I can only speak from my experience, and I'll caveat everything I say today with that. Like, I'm one officer with one experience in the police bureau, so I certainly don't speak for everybody. But I feel like there's not like a huge stigma. Like I said, I've had open conversations with officers, and even like retiring officers who are leaving. I've had conversations about them, like having to work through all the stuff they've been through in their career, and like they've kind of encouraged me to like check in and be like, hey, don't wait till the end of your career to go like work through some of this stuff. Like, it builds up. You need to work through it as you go. And so I feel like an EAP program, especially Officer Brunner is doing a great job of really just like pushing that forward and working hard to get the information out there, get us extra training. We've had trainings on like emotional resilience for law enforcement. I went to a full day training on that not too long ago, maintaining resilience and family balance and stuff like that. So I think I answered all the questions asked, and probably more than you wanted.
I also wanted to share, as a non-sworn member, sometimes I get to blend in, and I get to like overhear conversations. And I come from social services, and I've actually been blown away by really open conversations between folks about their own like therapy and who they went to and recommendations. And it's folks that I might work directly with and not always directly with. And so I think that is part of, like, I've also had conversations about the culture shift from 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, when we're probably all going through that culture shift, no matter where we were, and talking about stigma. And I'm an addiction counselor. So like, this is conversations that we've, had in my career too. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, just like a little bit anecdotal, like information of that what I see and experience there as well.
If I could jump in, a question, I guess it would be for you, Emily, and also Chase, is one of the challenges we have right now with trying to get people engaged in care is the fact that so many things in life get politicized or weaponized. And so if you have a coworker who is struggling, but they may see their behavior as an outgrowth or an expression of their political views, instead of it being evidence of their mental health status, what kind of communication dynamic do you have for peers to recommend that peers get treatment or that somebody check in with them? They may think that they're okay, and their anger might be just because they don't like how something's been politicized, as opposed to the fact that they may be burnt out and just not recognizing it. And I can see how that would dissuade somebody from getting mental health care. They may think, no, I'm fine. I just don't like the way X people act, or this situation's handled, or management's doing that, or the public feels this way. And I've begun to see more and more episodes of that, where both anecdotally and then just reading, anything from newspapers to comments on mental health. I'm just wondering, is there room for designing a process that's not punitive, but could say, hey, my coworker's not doing well. My partner's kind of not feeling good, or has been saying things that might indicate they're having mental health challenges. Is that something that we can address as we're planning this?
I would say, I guess that's a big topic. I would say that the police culture, like we're pretty upfront with each other. And, you know, we have relatively thick skin. So I see a lot of times, I mean, if someone's, you know, saying or doing something that's like off, or, you know, like generally like we'll just talk, you know, we're not afraid to talk to each other about it. And I mean, certainly that's a part of the training, right? Just like with any mental health, you know, with the assist suicide training, like intervening in that type of thing, all that stuff. I mean, you know, part of it is just like, don't be afraid to call it out and be like, hey, are you okay? Do you need help? And so I would say, I mean, certainly we can, you know, I'm sure everyone in every profession can be better at that, right? Like it's easy to just kind of be like, oh, that's going to be a weird conversation. I don't know. But you know, I feel like we're a pretty upfront group. And like I said, there's not the stigma that, you know, maybe once was there. And certainly through peer support, you know, if like you know, a sergeant is seeing something, they might reach out to the peer support officer who might, you know, find someone on their shift that's a peer support officer who say, hey, will you just check in with this person? And then, you know, the Oregon law has protections where, you know, we get confidentiality aside from them, just like everyone else, right? Like they don't admit to crimes and they're not imminently dangerous to themselves or others. All of that conversation is protected. And so, you know, they can feel safe talking, you know, to me or whoever, and expressing whatever feelings they have outside of that, you know, those boundaries. And so I think that's certainly there. I mean, you know, of course, there's always room for improvement in those types of things, but I mean, I've seen huge strides in that. And, you know, we just had an EAP, we're working through an EAP training that Amy's putting on that everyone involved is going through, and she's working through those systems. Like, how do we better reach people? How do we better, like, you know, because I mean, this has been a crazy year for everyone in the whole world, but, you know, and policing also, and maybe especially like just a hard year mental health wise. And so a lot of people have struggled this year. You know, I've struggled, my family struggled. And so, you know, luckily for the most part, we have like pretty good support, but everyone's working through stuff right now. You know, our entire profession has been, you know, turned upside down. And it's just a big, you know, that's a big life event. And so there's a lot of discussions about how do we address that and how do we help people be healthy and successful and stay in this career, right? And not leave, not get burnt out. And so certainly that's being talked about. And again, you know, and I mentioned, I sent Barbara an email, like having Officer Harris and then Officer Bruner-Dennert come at some point and talk to everybody about what their program is. I mean, like I said, I'm no expert, and Amy does this full time, Officer Bruner-Dennert. So she definitely would have a lot more to say about it. But
yeah, Celeste, I would just kind of jump on what Chase is saying too. He's the younger guy, so he's seen this through his lens, which is, hey, we do a great job with this. And my lens would be, wow, we've come a long way with this. Because when I first started, you didn't talk about it.
Right.
You didn't have conversations about it. So it's not quick gains, they're slow gains, but in, you know, my 25 years, we've come a long way. The other thing we have, and I know it kind of gets, you know, it kind of gets poo-pooed internally, but we do have a system. It's called EIS, and it does trigger some, hey, you need to check in on this person. So there are certain metrics within that system. So if you used force X amount of times during a month, that's going to trigger an alert. And that means that it's going to get sent to a supervisor to say, hey, you need to check on this person. Look at the force they used and see what's going on. It could be complaints. It could be traumatic incidents. There's all sorts of factors within that system that can send that alert. It is not a perfect system. I'm not going to say that to try to help alleviate some concerns and try to help officers, you know, fix problems before they derail.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Captain Bates, and that is, in the world I live in and work in, we do screenings for depression. We do screenings for suicides. We have ASAM for drug and alcohol assessments, and for all of our clients, and all of that. And I'm wondering, does your department have screening tools that could be like used if an individual, if you felt that an individual might be, headed down a path that they don't even recognize? Because I'm going to tell you something, most of the people I've ever talked to all believe they don't have any problems, okay? And when I used to work in the jails and I would say, who in the jail is, innocent, all the hands would go up. So I've seen and heard a lot of things that are, just basically done because